Hello, everyone. This is my Radiohead tier list. Now, we're going to rank these albums chronologically. So, we're going to start with Pablo Honey. And Pablo Honey, I believe, is a C tier album. Now, Pablo Honey is, of course, the debut in Radiohead's career, and it doesn't really represent their sound that well, I don't think. I mean, it's kind of just a response to the grunge movement of the early 90s. Obviously, it has their biggest song, Creep, which a lot of fans love to berate. Um, and because of that song, I feel like fans will berate this album as a whole. And I kind of agree, but I also kind of don't agree. I think there are some good songs on this album, like Stop Whispering and Anyone Can Play Guitar and Blowout, but there's also some misses. Although I really don't think this album is as bad as people think it is. So that's why I'm putting it in the C tier. Okay, next up we have The Benz. Now, The Benz, I'd say, is an amazing album. I'd put it in the B tier. Now, the Benz was definitely an evolution for Radiohead. It showed that they had more to offer than what was on Pablo Honey, as they went into other sounds that were not grunge and more uh, kind of like Britpop, I want to say, but not entirely. It's still like alternative, but farther from it than Pablo Honey was. And there are some beautiful songs on this album, like Fake Plastic Trees and Nice Dream, and Street Spirit Fade Out is an amazing closer. So yeah, I just think this album is amazing, but if we're ranking these albums relative to the rest of Radiohead's discography, I'd put this in the B tier. Next we have OK Computer, and this is going straight to the S tier. Now, OK Computer is my favorite album ever, point blank. Um, it's a really sonically beautiful album that paints a really dystopian picture of what the future is going to be like. And I think they captured it perfectly. And the sounds on this album are just so varied, and the production is so nice and crisp, and everything is there. You have great songs. Paranoid Android, what an amazing song. Exit music, the climax that it builds up to is amazing. Let Down, of course, the overrated gem, or I mean, the underrated gem. And well, yeah, this album is just incredible. I don't think there's a single dud on it, or anywhere where it went wrong. So yes, that's why OK Computer is an S tier album for me. Next up, we got Kid A. Kid A is also an S tier album, even though it sounds completely different to OK Computer. I think there's a lot of great songs on Kid A, although it might not be their most cohesive project by far. I think there's a lot of different sounds on it that kind of contrast each other. Like, for example, the transition from the national anthem to How to Disappear Completely. They're pretty different songs, but I'd say it flows over well. Like every song on this album is also amazing. Um, you have beautiful ones like How to Disappear Completely and Tree Fingers, and Idiotech is just very groovy. Motion Picture Soundtrack is also a beautiful song. And then you have just some of the more strange songs that Radiohead made, like Kid A and the National Anthem and Morning Bell. They're a bit haunting in a way, and I really like that. So, yeah, this is why Kid A is an S tier album for me. Next up, we got Amnesiac. Now, a lot of people like to hate on Amnesiac because they say it's like Kid A leftovers, and I kind of get that. But at the same time, I think Amnesiac works really well as its own cohesive piece of work. You have songs like Pyramid Song, which is one of the best songs they've ever made, in my opinion. Uh, the other version of Morning Bell, which I know a lot of people don't really like, but I personally prefer to the one on Kid A. And the closer, Life in a Glass House, with its jazz, is just really nice and one of the best closers they've probably made. So yeah, Amnesiac, great album. I think a lot of people don't give it the credit it deserves. Okay, next we got Hail to the Thief. Now, Hail to the Thief isn't one I really enjoy as much as their other albums. Hail to the Thief kind of marks a return to the rock sound that they were doing prior to Kid A. And there's some really good songs on Hail to the Thief, but there's also some ones I really don't care that much about. And being their longest album, it is kind of bloated. And I know Radiohead themselves have said that they wish this album was shorter, and I would agree. There are like great songs like 2 + 2 = 5 and uh, They're There and Go to Sleep. But there's also some kind of ones that I'm not that interested in, like Backdrifts and Punch Up at the Wedding. So yeah, it's just not that interesting to me. But the highlights are really good. I forgot to mention the closer, "A Wolf at the Door," which is an amazing closer too. Great song. So yeah, this one goes in the B tier for me. I'm just not a huge fan, but I respect that album. It's still a great one. Next up, we got In Rainbows. Now, don't get mad at me. In Rainbows is going in the A tier. Now, I know a lot of people love In Rainbows. They think it's the best Radiohead album, and I respect that opinion. I think In Rainbows is a gorgeous album. There's some really beautiful songs on In Rainbows, and the cohesiveness of that album is just incredible. But there, to me, are just some places where the album gets a tad stale, like, don't hate me, but House of Cards. I think it drags on just a tad too long. But otherwise, it's just great and haunting, like on Weird Fish's Arpeggi. And you also got bangers like Jigsaw Falling into Place and Body Snatchers. So it is very close to perfection, in my opinion. I just don't think it's quite there. But I do understand people having it as their favorite Radiohead album. It's a very gorgeous album. The King of Limbs. Okay. The thing about The King of Limbs, it's fine. I personally do not think it's one of their better records. It is, I think, their shortest record. I'm not sure if it's shorter than Pablo Honey, but it's one of their shorter records. And I think it's good that it's like that because the sounds that they had on The King of Limbs, I mean, they're pretty interesting. I know that album was basically based on like loops and stuff, which is fine. It's an interesting direction to go if we're talking about electronic music. But loops do get repetitive, and I think this album especially exemplified that with the runtime. It even feels a little long. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't interesting sounds on this album or good songs on it, like Lotus Flower or Separator, but there's also some just pretty boring uh, songs on it. Now, I have heard this album being described as kind of like a swampy kind of album, and that is a pretty good description in my opinion. I do think that the songs have that kind of vibe, but I just don't find myself coming back to it very often. So for that reason, I'm going to put The King of Limbs in the D tier. And finally, we have A Moon-Shaped Pool, which is their most recent album released in 2016. Now, A Moon-Shaped Pool is it's beautiful. It's frankly amazing. Definitely their saddest album. A lot of things were happening with Tom York, with his wife, and whatnot. So he was feeling pretty upset and just very saddened. And a lot of the songs on this album show that, like Daydreaming for sure, and True Love Waits. What an amazing closer and a very heartbreaking and sad one. Um, I do think there are some moments on A Moonshade Pool that are a little. mm, How do I say this? They're like I don't really find myself that captivated by them. But otherwise, I mean, this album is great. I know Johnny Greenwood was experimenting with strings on this album after composing the film scores for many movies, and that's a great thing. Strings sound really nice on this album. So yeah, this is my Radiohead tier list. Let me know what you think in the comments if you also like Radiohead. And subscribe to this channel, please. I really need subscribers. Thank you.